stay with you. Coming alive. This moment. You gotta breathe out.
Before we begin, I want to gently share that today's episode includes personal reflections related to illness, stress, and past adversity. Please listen at your own pace. It's okay to pause, breathe, or step away if anything feels heavy. This conversation is shared with awareness and encouragement and is not intended to replace medical or mental health care. My hope is that this space feels safe, grounding, and empowering for you. Welcome back to The Root. I'm so grateful that you are here. Today, this episode is going to be a little different. I want to share more of my personal story. This podcast is called The Root for a reason. Getting to the root was where the healing began for me. You've heard me say it when I think back over my life. Was I missing something lurking about, hidden? Decades working in healthcare, food service, and well-being. Focused on health maintenance, disease prevention, purposeful in my wellness, implementing a multi-dimensions of wellness. This was my area of purpose. I believe in movement, and as an athlete, definitely believe in nutrition. My kitchen's my laboratory. I often would say good nutrition and physical activity will not give you a get out of jail card for illness, accidents, and disease. But what a force field. Yet, this disease, this debilitating disease, multiple sclerosis, invaded my body. Something was missing. I didn't know the name or the language, but I know something. There was a disconnect deeper. Something was laying dormant. And too often we get a diagnosis and we just accept it without even asking ourselves if we don't think we're a candidate. And sometimes not even thinking we have the right to ask why. I sure didn't think I was a candidate, but nor was I just going to accept what conventional medicine said about this diagnosis. I desire us healthy, mind, body, and soul. And as I research this particular disease, multiple sclerosis, multiple scarring, I was determined to reconnect and disconnect, rewire my brain, regain my mobility in both legs and my right arm from paralysis. But I was also determined with purpose to find out why and why my body said no in such a debilitating way. This question, it didn't cause fear in me. This diagnosis, it was, I thought, not in my body. Decades questioning various conditions, behaviors, in especially in children. So today is the moment I want to talk more about when my body actually said no, it had had enough. And this was before I had ever heard the word ACEs or the adverse childhood experiences or Dr. Rige Hama in German New Medicine and 5 biological laws. Before I had discovered any of that, evidence-based, powerful research. But however, I always believed that there was a missing link, that there was a link between adversity, high levels of stress, and chronic illness. I just believed it's not what's happening to us, but it's what's happening inside us biologically when things happen or don't happen. You can't separate the mind from the body, even if we try. And so often that's what's happening. Physicians, physical, they look at the physical part, and mental health, they look at the mental health piece. We are one body, one organism, three parts with you working in unison. So my journey of healing and restoration, finding my way back to wholeness, health, it began, as I said before, in the name, multiple sclerosis, multiple scars. So this diagnosis took me on a journey looking back in my childhood. There were childhood experiences. Now I see that left imprints. When I was, a baby or a very small child, a military daughter, there was a time where my dad was missing in the war, and I used to hear that story all the time, and I know in things that when we couldn't find things, there were some challenging times in our family that things had to happen, things happened, and just hearing that story, I know it. Some of my independence comes from that, and not in the good ways, but some not so good. Remember when I was around 5 years old, and these two neighborhood boys used to sick their dogs on me, just for the fun of it. Still dog anxiety to this day. Being trapped in a house fire when I was young, a teenager, and needing to be rescued through this very small window. And when I remember when my wounds were bandaged up, and we were more settled, I would hear the word fire and just take off running. And no one really knew why. But then I think back when I was a sophomore in college, that diagnosis of Bell's palsy, which, again, I thought, once I researched it and realized what it was, I'm like, not a candidate. I was in some of the best physical shape as a track athlete, which aided in my recovery. But the diagnosis itself, I thought, I just was not a candidate, and I always felt something lay dormant or something was linked to that diagnosis. Those are just a few experiences that I touched on. And so these were adverse childhood experiences, not necessarily amongst the list of the 10 categories in that were part of the adverse childhood study. But nonetheless, adverse childhood experience, I truly believe, I know they have lasting, and that the evidence shows they have lasting negative effects on health, well-being, and opportunity. And as part of the adversary, you have environment, you have household, different experiences. I also had to look at my environment, prior to this diagnosis. And as I put these experiences together, they began to come together like a puzzle, almost like a puzzle with magnet pieces. They were just coming together, and I started to piece back together the discovery why the no. Our experiences happen in our environment, both positive and negative. So, as I experienced, as I continued to seek, to find why my body said no, and in such an offensive way, but now, or did it? Now, looking through clear lenses, the affliction. What is affliction? Something that causes pain or suffering. We've all experienced these on some level, but there are some of us that have experienced affliction on deeper levels and just are not aware of how these factors may be the main contributor to our health challenges, both mental, physical, and emotional. And I had to ask myself, was I one of those people? Realizing that the body keeps score, it remembers, and it keeps a record. I had to think back of, our immune system. Now I call it our support system. That it's designed to protect us when there is adversity, affliction, and toxic levels of stress, often rooted in childhood, that keeps a record too. And the damage it can cause can be catastrophic. It goes unaware, unaddressed, and derail our health. I had to ask myself that question again. Was this part of my story? Could it be part of yours? And this disease just continued, this diagnosis just continued to compel me to search deeper. My immune system is attacking me. The system that's designed to defend, to protect, that keeps a record and recognizes and destroys. That's what we say the immune system does. Why was my body trying to protect me from me? Destroying cells, myelin, what? That didn't make sense. But it was worth me fighting for why. And wow, what a discovery and revelation. I do love this body. I love the science of the human body. The science of embryology. Oh my goodness, that one organism with 3 parts that make up us. That one brain with different pieces that develop at different phases that are directly connected with specific organs. I'm like, I just love it and understand it. And I want others to understand that. How our organs and emotions are intertwined. That brain gut connection. Our heart, the sustainer of life, above all else, guard, because out of it flows the issues of life. Our feelings, our actions and reactions are heart driven and can affect our health. Now, my story may be different from yours, my childhood experiences, my illnesses, my struggles. However, awareness and action, that got me where the healing began. Awareness is the beginning of change and the beginning of healing. And we cannot repair if we're not aware. As a passionate advocate for children, I believe that every adult's well-being is rooted in their childhood experiences, mine included. So as I continue to seek to find answers, I thought about stress. My stress levels. Stress. It's a normal part of life, healthy development. It's necessary to have some levels of stress. There's tolerable stress. There's just that normal stress, but then there's toxic stress. And I think back when I was a track athlete, and when we had track meets, the more nervous I was before whatever the meet was, or depending if it was like one of those maybe rival meets or something, the more nervous I was, the faster I ran. That good nervous energy is just like brought out beast mode. But that only lasted for the time it took me for the gun to go off, and I was on my way to the finish line. But I know, not so much in my childhood, but in my adult life, I was under prolonged high stress. So as I researched that the biology of stress, the healthy development can be derailed by excessive long activation of the stress response in the body, in the brain. Such toxic stress can have damaging effects on learning, behavior across the lifespan. The hormone cortisol is released to manage, depending on our overall stress, it increases or decreases. So when I think about our children, our youth, in the ACE study results, especially if our numbers are, we all have a number, if it's more than 4 or more, I think about the bodies and brains of our precious children, especially under 5, that are experiencing toxic levels of stress, and what it's doing to their precious brains and bodies, how it's affecting their learning and their development and their behavior. Everything is an ADHD or ADD. We need to look holistically at those children. And if they're adults with challenging problems, look at that too. And that's where compassion and understanding needs to happen. But I had to, when I did that research on the biology of stress, again, I had to ask myself, was this another piece of my puzzle? No, I wasn't experiencing like learning challenges or behavioral challenges, but I definitely was experiencing some physical challenges, and there were some that I just really didn't think much of, even when I was younger and this throughout my life that didn't kind of make sense. But then the obvious ones that didn't, I just definitely didn't think I was a candidate for, just because of the purposefulness and how y'all know I talk about my 5 foundations. We eat, we hydrate, we breathe, we move, we rest, we feel. Are we doing these well? Well, I had to revisit some of, was I doing all those well? Especially when I said this episode is about when my body said, okay, I had enough. No, and that's what I thought. But in 2009, that's when that happened. There was a huge no. Multiple, and then came that diagnosis. When I remember this, I was working nonprofit, working in the community. Yeah, I was working a lot, working and doing. And the first signs, I remember I was like, I was at work and I was just so tired. And there was just a couple of things going on. So a coworker went to she said, I'm going with you to the doctor. And then I was telling them how I was, the doctor, like, well, this was going on, this was going on. And then I remember she said, do you know what she does? And she started running down my list of what I was involved in. And he said, well, I think the best prescription I can write for you is a day off, a vacation. And I thought, yes. And I have to admit, I used to drive around and I'm like, Pam, you are so exhausted. I mean, it wasn't, if I laid my head down, I would go to sleep. And I would drive around saying, sleep deprivation can kill you, Pam. You talk about educating, and you got your nutrition and movement. So there were those signs. And then I remember the time where I went to the doctor and I thought, I told Dr. Mitchell, I had great doctors. And when something was wrong, they were like, okay, because, I had dialogue. I wasn't just going to go in there and say, oh, I'm having this, and they just write a prescription and send me out the door. Oh, no. And I'm empowering you not to do that. Not just say, okay, this is what I'm having going, these are the symptoms, and they say, okay, it's this, here, take that, and go on. This take a medicine. But I remember when I went and I said, I don't know. I mean, something's off. I have this feeling like a cell phone on vibrate. That's the only way I could describe it. Just zip, 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 zip. I'm like, I don't know what this is, and I was tired, and I've always had some sensitivity with sunlight, but it kind of gotten worse, and I remember in his office, he did some different tests, and then he had me stand up, and he said, close your eyes. And I did, and I was like, why am I moving? And so it prompted him. He said, well, I'm going to run some tests. So he ran some tests, and I remember in upstate, we don't do this in Florida now, but you had to get your car inspected. So I went to get my car inspected. And so the place I took it to, it was maybe like a half mile from my office. And I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful day. I'll just walk. I like to keep it moving. It doesn't have to be labor intensive, but we need to do it. And I remember I was walking, and I'm like, the more I walked, the slower I was getting. I was like, what in the world? I mean, it was a half a mile. I miles felt like I was climbing Mount Everest. And by the time I got to the door, And then I walked in, everybody was like, oh, Miss, well, what, Miss Jefferson, are you okay? That was my name then. And I said, I don't know. And sat down, and I remember I called my doctor, and then I was thankful for my community of people that this loved me, for church family, work family. Um, and so they had called, and those tests that my doctor had requested, and I had an MRI and a T scan and several others. They were in and said, "Well, can you get here?" So a coworker took me, and they were like, "Oh, it could be this, that, nothing. None of it sounded good." From Lyme's disease to in a couple others, they said in MS. I was like, not a candidate. And so I initially know I was like, I need a vacation. That's what I need. Um, so, but then as time continued on, I thought multiple sclerosis, multiple scars. That continued to resonate with me. And also the link between this damaging inflammation found in this diagnosis. I thought, I didn't I didn't see any inflammation. I wasn't swollen, and so, but from those MRIs, there was obvious internal inflammation growing in my brain, in spine. So I thought that linked to and feeding off of stress. So as every time I had an MRI, because y'all, I'm a study of the body. I mean, I purposely didn't go to med school because I wanted to be on that preventive end, but I sure studied like a med student, and understand how this body is designed to function. Um, so I every time I had an MRI report, I always got my own copy, so I have my own little library of my body. So, but I thought when I said the inflammation that I didn't see but was internal, the feeding off of stress. I thought of the years of adversity. Some in childhood, um, but in adulthood, and I think adversity, that continued difficulty and misfortune, the enduring the toxic, stressful environment, and I'm being very transparent. Some bad behavior, some this in my adult life. That a lot of it I just kept to myself. And me and God had this conversation to us, and I'm thankful for that covering. The volumes of horrific hurts done, shame of divorce, the suppressing healthy anger, physically exhausted, overworked, needing to say no to even some good things, so overwhelmed, and just forgetting me. And I was truly in survival mode for years. There was a time, it was like a 3-year span where I literally got 0 to 3 hours of sleep. And there was one time I remember I was working for a company, nonprofit, but also I was coaching track, and I had my children, church things, and I had my own business too with Pamela's Kitchen and Teaching Center, and I went to drive across the town to the track, and I couldn't remember where I was going because I had been up literally. Days were running into days, and I think it was about it almost going on day 3 where I thought, if you and I was telling myself, sleep deprivation can kill you. You have got to. And I was talking to myself, get say no. Um, and oftentimes that's, especially with women, we're the nurturers. We carry so much and forget about us. So, but I was thankful also. There were positive outlets during this chaos of adversity. My precious jewels, my three B's, my Bruce, Brittany, and Bryce. My faith in God, truly my ride or die, my Father in heaven, who I know loves me dearly. And I have to say, think me not so strong, but I there was a plan and purpose that all that I had and had to endure. And then during those really hard times, it's like that footprint poem. They said, paraphrasing, God, you said you would always be there, but some of my most difficult, challenging times, you weren't there. Um, but he said during that time, that's when there was just one set of footprints, that's when I was carrying you. And I remember the love and care when I was paralyzed and it brought my house and upstairs and such, and then just how the honey in the rock that came about, even through paralysis, grants came in and adapted, part of my house and did this wonderful and just almost like a remodel. So there are multiple honey in the rock experiences. My beloved church family. Oh goodness, shout out to Faith Temple Community Church in New York, and in my beloved church, Church of God by Faith. Right? I mean, I just the love of the saints were there, and those were some of the healthy outlets that truly were part of the healing. However, I wasn't. Oh, I was unaware of the actual damage, or some of it was damage, or all what was happening within my body, causing the debilitation, some of the symptoms. And I was definitely unaware of what was actually happening biologically, the good and the bad that had developed within my body. And in hindsight, yes, I understand that now. But in the absence of awareness, there were at times some fear, more of for my children. Oh gosh, if I wasn't able to care for them. Um, and that fueled some of what was actually happening within my body. So, but as I continued to just search and question, I just believed something was lying dormant in my body, triggering this massive downward spiral in my health. But quitting was an option. Getting to the root was. I have to say, MS at Metdon, like me and Jesus, we was kicking it to the curve. So my look back revealed the prolonged adversity both in childhood and as an adult, the emotional difficulty and misfortune, as I said, that continue this affliction as well, the toxic stress factors that would come to aid me if indeed, say, I was having like a fight or flight situation. I was in fight or flight too much in my adulthood life, especially in relationships. Um, that so there was those times of when you're in that fight or flight. If there's, say, a bear in the woods, and you have to, like, okay, sense go out the window. Oh, what am I going to do? Or if you're in a car accident or something happens that's like an accident where you need that inflammation, you need that increased blood to start saving your life. Those that increased blood pressure, the immune system, now I call it the support system, being activated, all that coming into play and more to help save our lives. That repeated scenario was the unseen bruising of affliction. And now I know the resolution of some of those conflicts in me too. Where there is healing, there is pain, inflammation, and other symptoms. So understanding what symptoms really mean. The heightened levels of chronic illness and disease can be linked to adversity and underlying symptoms in conditions like diabetes and heart disease and obesity and insomnia, addictions, cancers. You can fill in the blank. MS. I want to empower you to ask, what do these symptoms really mean? And that's what I said, and that's what I discovered. The real meaning behind the definitely the challenging times. It's not what's happening to us. It's what's happening biologically when things happen and don't happen. But at that time, still was unaware of the secret, that missing link. But I was relentless and determined to fight back and win. And so with a greater and deeper focus on these areas, I began to recover absence of medicine. And I'm not against medicine. In the shortfall, temporarily, especially with little or no side effects. I as an athlete, there's times I would take ibuprofen. I've taken a Tylenol, but some of these severe, high-level narcotic drugs prescribed for pain and or taking a drug forever, and that just wasn't my choice. And but I chose to fuel my body and cells with food as medicine. Fitness, movement, these were always in place. But I had, like I said, I had been doing those since my youth. But there was more that I needed to be focusing on. Self-regulation, learning to stop suppressing what I was feeling. There was some time. I need to say it is not. That is not okay. We need to say some of that. No, that's not okay. And just holding in true hurt or feelings or not being able to express ourselves, and that's part of some of the challenges with our children. They need to know they are valued. That's why every time one passes by, I say, I see and you value. Who you are makes a difference. Your presence is more important than you know, because children need that validation. They need that affirmations as a child. Many of our adults, narcissism is real. And they're not born. They're created. And much of it is what happened, what didn't happen in childhood. So I learned also that the rest I needed was more than sleep. Even though I needed some sleep, and that's still a process. But this discovery was not just for me. No, it was to bring awareness to others too. I desire us well, mind, body, and soul. And as an educator, as a holistic health facilitator, providing steps to a healthier us, awareness is the beginning of change, and we cannot repair if we're not aware. Recognizing well-being needed an advocate. I mean, that was a discovery as well on my journey of healing and restoration, finding my way back to wholeness, health. That wellness itself needed an advocate. And so that's what we do through Grace to Overcome. And that is a personal calling that I have to advocate well being rooted in hope, helping others pursue excellence and wellness, to equip and empower. The body keeps score. When it says no, rather is a cold or cancer, I encourage you to ask yourself, what is behind these symptoms? Why my body? And also, is it a no? It very well might be a yes. In healing, there is pain in healing. We bust a knee, we do something, oozing, and we cut, and we see it's healing and coagulate, but it sometimes, but that's painful. We opt for surgeries, and then they say, okay, while it's healing, you need to, typically take this medicine or whatever to suppress the pain. So we need to feel the pain sometimes. I mean, it makes you know you are alive, and it's temporary if we understand the pain and the root of it. So, ask what might be the unseen bruising of affliction or resolved conflicts in me. The adverse childhood experience study in German New Medicine, the five biological laws, that those bodies of research, oh my, shifted everything for me. These were the language that my body was already speaking clearly. So I knew there was a disconnect, and I found it, the missing link. And it was years later, after the fight. I would say I had a fight with debilitating disease, and I won. But I was still wondering what and why. I encountered first the adverse childhood study, and then later Dr. Hama's work. You know, um, the psyche, the brain, and the organs, and how they work in unison, which I've always believed in the mind body connection. As I said, this how there's one organism, three parts working together that makes up us. We can't separate it. So, what I lived, science later explained. And I sure could keep that to myself, even though I took my time, um, really digging in, and before as like I said, as a holistic health facilitator, sharing steps to a healthy life, empowering others, a disseminator of evidence-based research or anything before I would share that I have done my due diligence. You know, but through that research and through my lived experience, realizing disease is not betrayal. I mean, I know something about betrayal. And we'll and actually do that through the root. We're going to talk some more about, getting to the root is where the healing begins. But disease was not the betrayal. It was communication. It was the disease, my challenge, they were communicating to me the unseen, highlighting what I was not aware of. It wasn't my body failing, it was my body protecting me, not attacking me. I think, I think about my community and the various other communities and in the state of our nation. We are in a health crisis that affects all of us, crossing every age, population, race, social, economic status. Traditional approaches need to be verified. We must be willing to address the root causes of afflictions and conflicts we face, the real root cause. Or we have to be looking for it. Well, we found it, and challenge the status quo and explore holistic, biologically aligned, evidence-based models of care to create a healthier future for everyone. And again, what I was sharing, just some of when my body said no, and some of my personal testimony. That this is why the root exists. This is why Grace to Overcome exists, and the need for the Grace to Overcome Center for Research and Verification of Holistic Health Advancement to aid in making sure we are addressing the root causes of affliction and conflicts and so-called diseases and what symptoms really mean. This is why awareness matters, because you matter. These discoveries didn't create my understanding, they confirmed it, because I was looking for it. And there was no way I was going to ignore what I found or keep to myself. If my body can speak before I had language, yours can too. So I invite you to ask yourself, what has my body been saying? What have I normalized? Or what have I ignored? Wellness is multidimensional. My encouragement is to you to know that self-care isn't selfish. And we eat, we hydrate, we breathe, we move, we rest, we feel. How are we doing? Join me on a journey of discovery to see. But be aware of what symptoms mean. When given a diagnosis, ask questions and fight for you. We don't need this time out for fighting a cancer and fighting a disease. Fight for your wellness. We are hardwired to heal. In this new year, in 2026, invest in you. Unleash the best you, because you matter. And if you want to connect more with us, reach out by phone, or email, or check out our website. And you can join our community and let us help you on your journey back or to wellness, health. So this is Pamela Hawkins. I bid you be well. And next time on the route, we'll go a little deeper. And I'll share a little more of my story. And we're going to continue to unlock the body's wisdom. I'm excited about some wellness sessions we'll be starting called Hardwired to Heal, practical guidance, taking you on a journey of discovering the body's built-in support system and how Symptoms guide us toward healing. So if you want to connect, reach out. And I just want to encourage you to be well and fight for your wellness. Till next time, this is Pamela Hawkins on The Root.
You believe the change is coming. I know the change is coming.